what's up?
How's it going, my dudes?
So good, man. So good. We're here talking about the SEC. We're talking about MicroStrategy. What's been on your mind lately? What's got your interest in Bitcoin lately?
It's been a crazy year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, man.
2022 is lining up to be even more insane.
Why do you say that? What are you thinking?
I don't know. I think people are really not appreciating how crazy of a year it's been. Um, the price action is obviously what's always people are always obsessed about. I think it's relatively safe to say that we've broken previous cycles. A lot of us who have been around for a minute have been basically modeling it off of modeling our expectations off of what happened in 2013 and 2017. On that 4-year, cycle split up by the halving with 2 years in between. And neither of those cycles looked anything like this. There was for a little bit, I thought maybe it was going to look similar to the 2013 cycle. And then where the 2013 cycle had a pump in the spring, and then we kind of fell off for a little bit. And then there was another pump in the fall. That's not what this looks like. So, and all is fair here. We're in new territory price wise. Adoption wise, I mean, the amount of mind share Bitcoin has in the global conversation is unreal, right? I mean, we're going to have a sitting president at the Bitcoin conference this year. There's going to be senators, there's going to be congressmen, there's going to be mayors, there's going to be business leaders. Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas now, people just talking about Bitcoin all the time. You turn on CNBC almost every morning, Bitcoin's on the ticker. People are talking about Bitcoin. So all that considered, the where we stand going into this next year just feels like no one can really fathom, what happens next or in how that happens.
Yeah, unprecedented territory here in Bitcoin land. I find it hard to believe, but there are probably still Americans walking around that have no idea, have only heard of Bitcoin a few times, but I think that's really going to change this year. And I think over the past year, it's really, like you said, just become more within the public discourse. It's just generally around more, even for people who aren't as involved as you and I.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the overwhelming majority of people have really no clue what Bitcoin is and what it represents or how it works, including the majority of us who are actually paying attention to it constantly. I'm the first one to admit that, even after being in it for almost 9 years now, I'm still learning. I learn every day, constantly improving my understanding of Bitcoin. But in terms of just the word Bitcoin, you got to imagine that the overwhelming majority of people have at least heard of it. If you say Bitcoin, they know it's some kind of digital money. They might not know anything beyond that, and they might think it's a pump and dump. They might think it's a scam, but they've actually heard the word, right? Which is a sea change over the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, I would have conversations and people are like, "Oh, what are you working on or whatever?" And I would try and figure out a way of explaining it without using the word Bitcoin, because I knew the second I said that, they would have no idea. But now I just say Bitcoin, and they at least have some kind of general concept of what I'm working on.
And so how do you, I mean, there's obviously something that goes along with this. The big buzzword would be crypto. And I harp, I don't know if you've watched this show, but I harp again and again on the fact that these are different asset classes that really more and more seem to have nothing to do with each other. In price correlation in US dollars aside, crypto is fundamentally different from Bitcoin. And I wondered if you could explain that for our audience in your terms, since they've heard me do it a million times.
I first of all, I mean, I just hate the term crypto. I guess, I mean, I don't think that Bitcoin should be compared to all these other projects that exist um, out there that are incorporating blockchains and digital tokens and whatnot. But at the same time, I actually am on the side that I think it should just all be lumped under the Bitcoin industry. So I have like kind of a weird perspective there where, I think all these shit coins, tokens, everything is really all part of Bitcoin. And why do I say that is because it's all based on the same idea of permissionless open source innovation, where anyone can fork a project, anyone can release it themselves. It's relatively little friction to actually move from Bitcoin into any of those if you so choose to. It's kind of the revolution that Bitcoin enabled, right? And it's all part of it. But at the same time, I mean, there's really no other projects that have the same objectives as the Bitcoin project does. And even those that don't even come close to accomplishing those objectives like Bitcoin does. And what are those objectives? Well, everything in life has trade-offs. And I think that's a really important thing for people to realize is like, there's no such thing as something that is perfect. The way I look at it is everything has trade-offs, and certain trade-off balances are better suited for certain things. And in Bitcoin's case, the trade-offs that were made and continue to be made is a global censorship-resistant money that is extremely hard to change, that is state-resistant, that anyone can access without a trusted third party, and that if you own more Bitcoin, you don't have more control over the network. And when you start to look at those and so those are the positive trade-offs. That on the opposite side, to make those trade-offs a reality, you end up with a more expensive to use system that is slower than more centralized options, that has a slower progress of change and improvement, because at the same time, if it can be very easy to change, then it can be very easy to attack, because those changes can be attacks. So when you put all that together, the end result is Bitcoin. And there's really no other project that comes close to hitting those kind of objectives, because most of them are going on a completely different trade-off balance there. They're trying to move fast. They're trying to be as cheap as possible. And a lot of them have, major stakeholders that want to have control over whatever network we're talking about. So I would say they don't even compete with Bitcoin. I agree that they shouldn't be in the same comparison conversation. But I would add the caveat that I think it is all, part of the Bitcoin industry, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Do you think we're kind of outsourcing innovations and bringing home pertinent ones back to Bitcoin? I mean, have you seen that in your time here? Or do you think, people, developing on like ETH or something are just kind of wasting their own talent?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned in the broader ecosystem, because those projects aren't as conservative. I think a lot of the times it's not like it's necessarily like an innovation or a new thing that is learned, more of just like proving previous thesis. So like, a lot of us for a while have been saying, the negatives and the risks of proof of stake networks. Now we're watching proof of stake networks actually get deployed and used in real time, and we're watching the issues that happen to those networks. Now, when those issues arise, when something like Solana has, like the 7 supernodes that run the whole network, because they didn't keep their network lean and they didn't want anyone to be able to run a node and use their own node, and then they turn off the whole thing and then turn it back on to get it to restart. That didn't actually really necessarily teach us something new, right? But it proved what a lot of us have been saying from the get-go,
Hmm.
and it becomes a very valuable uh, case study in Bitcoin development going forward, right? Like this is the natural, and we get this extreme, right? Like it would take years of bad Bitcoin changes and development, uh, maybe decades, to get to the point of the kind of centralization that something like Solana or Binance Chain has. So
Hmm.
instead, like the shitcoiners got it done in like 3 years, went to the absolute extreme, and showed us a real world case study of that being the case. Um,
So
yeah,
that's an
go.
important point for new investors too, because we constantly have this influx of new people who are getting into, I mean, I'll call it the broader, sort of crypto ecosystem. They don't understand the differences between these things, but every week one of these projects fails in one way or another and just
Right.
proves it becomes the exception that proves the rule. And I think they'll always be there. I mean, I don't see them going
They're
anywhere.
not going anywhere. And there's going to be more and more of them, and new ones will pop up every cycle. Um, that's could be seen as the negative of permissionless innovation, open source innovation, right?
Hmm.
Um, I would say though that it's important to realize that I don't consider any of these projects a threat to Bitcoin, the network. Um, I think it's a threat to people who choose to speculate on them, who will ultimately probably, the overwhelming majority of them will end up with less Bitcoin at the end of the day because they tried to trade and speculate on them. And my bigger problem is people who promote them, and they promote them without disclosing the trade-offs. As we discussed earlier, that everything has trade-offs. They'll pretend it's perfect, that it's way better than Bitcoin. It's the future. Bitcoin 2.0 is something we hear a lot of times.
Hmm.
Um, that's the threat. The threat is promoters not disclosing trade-offs, suckering in newcomers and retail into basically what amounts to really bad investments. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin keeps trucking on, and Bitcoin will continue to truck on. And if Bitcoin couldn't survive, thousands of shit coins and thousands of other projects competing with it, um, it never really had a chance in the first place, because no one can stop you from forking Bitcoin. No one can stop you from releasing a new project. That is one of the beauties of this ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the maybe developments within that ecosystem? I know you've been talking Lightning recently. I didn't know if you wanted to get into that here. What's exciting you lately about the development side?
Well, so see, Lightning is a cool strategy, and that actually kind of goes back to um, lessons learned from other chains, right? But in that case, it's actually kind of the opposite. Um, so with Bitcoin, the thesis has basically been, the consensus has been, let's be as conservative as possible. Let's keep the chain as lean as possible, as low as little bandwidth requirements, internet requirements, data requirements as possible, so it's accessible for people to use their own node and run the chain. Let's not put smart contracting, like expressive smart contracting ability directly in, like something like Ethereum does. And we can move that to other layers where you don't compromise the actual integrity of the main chain. Um, so the reason I said that is because Ethereum is finally, the Ethereum stakeholders are like, we want to do layer twos now. Like maybe layer twos are the option, and they were like delayed on that. So that in that way, it was almost went the opposite way, right? Instead of us learning from them, they learned from us. But the plan is basically everything has trade-offs. We don't want to compromise the trade-off balance of Bitcoin. So instead, let's add a second layer on top of Bitcoin, in this case, Lightning, but there's going to be, potentially thousands of different layer twos and layer threes on Bitcoin. And that trade-off balance will be different for that second layer. So with Lightning, you get slightly less censorship resistance. You get slightly less robustness. It's harder to back up your Bitcoin on it. It's natively a hot wallet, so you can't really keep it in cold storage. So it's less secure on a personal side. So you reduce the robustness, you reduce the censorship resistance, but in return, what you get instant transactions at a lower cost, right? So it's about balancing trade-offs, but doing so in a conservative way where the main chain trade-offs remain the same, but you can also at the same time take advantage of the trade-off balance that a lot of shitcoins try and do, which is more centralized, less censorship resistant, faster, cheaper. But you can do that natively on Bitcoin without compromising the main chain.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's really beautiful. The way I look at it, Bitcoin was an invention that altered the course of humanity. Lightning is an accelerant for Bitcoin, and I would classify Lightning as an innovation that alters the course of Bitcoin.
Right. But the coolest part to me, and it's often understated now because I feel like almost most people think like Lightning success is inevitable. But even like a year ago, um, that was a lot less obvious. And the coolest part to me is Lightning could completely fail. Lightning could be a complete disaster. Bitcoin's fine. And that's the beauty of scaling in layers right there.
Yeah. So what do you think about Liquid? What are other, layer projects that have caught your attention lately?
So this is why I think it's key constantly going back to this trade-off conversation, right? Because
Hmm.
all of these things come back down to trade-offs. And even when you're like talking about shitcoins and stuff, you should always ask yourself, what are the trade-offs? And if you ask a promoter what are the trade-offs and they tell you nothing, like they are full of shit and lying because trade-offs. So Liquid takes a different trade-off balance. Liquid is more centralized than Lightning. It's basically this federation. So you can imagine it like a multi-sig, where you're basically trusting that a majority of that multi-sig doesn't collude or get pressured to take down the network or steal your coins. So it's almost uh, like kind of similar to a Solana type model where you have like basically a bunch of super nodes. But it's a little bit different because anyone can leanly run their own Liquid node to at least verify the chain, but they're not the ones securing it, right? As a result, what do you get? You get cheap transactions. It's a it's a proper blockchain, so you can use it with like any blockchain explorer, unlike Lightning, that supports Liquid. If a block explorer exports but it's more comfortable. It's uses the same like address format as Bitcoin. It's easier to implement in wallets because it's very similar code wise to Bitcoin itself. But at the same time, you get fast, cheaper transactions. And they also have this thing called confidential transactions, which hides the balance, not the sender and the receiver, but it hides how much is being sent and
Hmm.
also hides what's being sent because Liquid was also built with tokens in mind. So you can use like Tether, the Bitcoin bond is going to be on it. You can like have stocks and stuff on it, all these different tokens. You could have NFTs on it. And on chain, like if you look at the Liquid chain, you can't tell if Liquid sats are being sent, if Liquid Tether is being sent, if Liquid NFTs are being sent. And there's some interesting privacy properties there that if a lot of people started using Liquid, you could start doing coin joins and like you could do like a coin join where like one person is holding like an NFT of like a spaceship from a video game, like one person's holding some Tether and one person's holding Bitcoin, and they can all coin join together because the balances and the assets aren't being shown because of confidential transactions. Um, but it hasn't really got that much usage, which greatly limits it. All these things basically need network effects. And I partially think that it's because engineering wise, it was much easier to do. All these things are difficult. Don't get me wrong. And I have appreciation for everyone who builds these things because I'm not. But it's much easier to implement than something like Lightning. And I think that a lot of people, Blockstream are the leads on this project. I think a lot of people thought that Lightning adoption would take longer and it would be like a good middle ground. But now that Lightning adoption is picking up, it's hard to find, besides tokens, it's hard to really find a real reason to use Liquid over Lightning. I guess another advantage that Liquid has is it's very easy to use it in an offline fashion. So you don't have to deal with the always on hot wallet like you have to do with Lightning. Another thing that has really hurt adoption of Liquid is just the fact that fees on Bitcoin aren't that high, right? So a lot of the thesis relied on fees going up on Bitcoin, so people will move to layer twos to try and reduce their fees. Another layer two that I find really interesting is something called Statechains,
Mm-hmm.
and Mercury Wallet is currently has one implemented. Statechain also gives you the benefit of low fees, and can give you advanced privacy benefits, at least in Mercury's implementation, because you can basically swap UTXOs, you can swap Bitcoin off chain for little to no fees, and then settle back on chain. Now, the negative of Statechains is if the person if the person you're swapping with is also the state chain provider, they can steal your money. But as long as the state chain is acting honestly and isn't being malicious,
Mm-hmm.
then they can't take your money. So it's an interesting trade-off balance with state chains, and that's pretty new. That's I think they've been out for like a couple months now.
Yeah, you're hearing more and more about them for sure. Do you know what problem do state chains seek to solve? I haven't had a chance to really look into them too much.
Um, the cool benefit of state chains is uh, you get a lot of the benefits of something like uh, Liquid, but with Liquid, there's a trust issue when you're trying to get from Liquid back to Bitcoin. With state chains, they're built in a way that if the state chain coordinator goes away and disappears, there's like a timeout function where you get your Bitcoin back on chain. So all of these networks are basically at the core trying to figure out a way of transferring Bitcoin in a non-custodial way, or at least a mitigated custodial risk kind of way, for low fees relatively fast. Because the alternative, if you don't have these layer twos, whether that's Lightning, Liquid, or state chains, is people are going to be using like Cash App and Coinbase and stuff. And you're already seeing it with like on Cash App, you can send to another Cash App user Bitcoin, and like that is completely custodial. It's KYC, but in some ways it's a layer two, right? Where you can just
Mm-hmm.
type in Alex McShane, and I can just send you Bitcoin for no fees instantly, right, off chain. So the goal is to get to a point where it's easy and cheap to send Bitcoin in a relatively non-custodial way. But how we do that isn't necessarily set in stone, and people are playing with different trade-off balances. And the state chain one is like kind of an interesting mix of trade-offs there. Um, that's why I keep saying relatively non-custodial, because a lot of people would argue Liquid is custodial. It's just federated custodial, so it's mitigated. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people would argue that state chains are custodial because if the state chain provider is malicious, then they could take your funds. But Lightning is you can use Lightning in a completely non-custodial way. One other thing with state chains is if the state chain provider does rob you, you do have verifiable proof at least, which is like a nice thing. Where like if
Mm-hmm.
there's if they just steal your money and they don't do like a full exit scam, you can like post that on the internet and everyone can tell they stole your money, and hopefully they'll switch to another state chain provider.
Yo, what is going on, plebs? We're going to take a break from our programming to tell you about the resurrection of our print magazine, starting with the El Salvador issue. Starting this fall, Bitcoin Magazine will be available on newsstands nationwide and at retail stores such as Barnes & Noble. Don't want to get off your couch though? No problem. You can also go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. So skip the line and get each issue shipped directly to your front door with our annual subscription. I'm talking 4 issues a year that contain exclusive interviews and profiles with leading Bitcoiners, actionable insights on the state of the market, breaking news and cultural trends, along with powerful photos and artwork from the best artists in the world.
Yeah. So what do you think about kind of the criticism that I think is a little bit misguided about people or corporations holding too much Bitcoin, about or about El Salvador releasing a Bitcoin bond?
Look, at the end of the day, one of the best aspects of Bitcoin is if you own more Bitcoin, it doesn't give you more control over the network. Bitcoin is inherently for enemies. We don't have to trust other participants in the network to act in a responsible way. Bitcoin is built in a way to just assume that all participants are self-interested and greedy, not going to just act out of blind benevolence. So that is very important to always keep in mind. And this is not really a threat to Bitcoin companies or countries.
Whereas
holding Bitcoin poorly.
Yeah, I think where people get confused is actually, in fact, all these proof of stake currencies,
Right.
it is in fact a problem when people hold too much, right? They
Yes.
accumulate real power over the network, and most of those networks are centralized from that aspect, where someone can make a decision that governs or disenfranchises your property. Whereas in
Right.
Bitcoin, I don't care if Michael Saylor owns a million of the 21 million Bitcoins.
Right. Now, right. So that's why it's going to be even more important for us to keep bringing this up, because as these proof of stake networks develop, they are going to run into a lot of issues, especially if there's stuff like an ETF or something like that. These ETFs tend to just gobble more coin over time as more people invest in them. So that will be a negative for proof of stake networks. I will say that there's like a soft negative in respect to first of all, if MicroStrategy, for instance, is obviously the leader in corporate Bitcoin treasuries. They're the first real non-Bitcoin company to come in and just start trying to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. El Salvador is the first country to do legal tender. Now, if Bitcoin is legal tender, if either of these countries, if El Salvador or MicroStrategy end up losing their Bitcoin because of third-party risk, because the regulated custodian they chose gets seized or gets hacked or something like that, we'll have a good half a year of annoying shit where like people are like, Bitcoin was hacked, no one can do this safely, just because they chose not to do it safely and they're very public, that they've become in a lot of ways examples for the rest of the world of what Bitcoin ownership is, right? So if they fuck it up, it would just be really bad press. A lot of people, it would be an education mess. We'd get through it, Bitcoin would be fine. There's also a situation where if you're a large holder, you can obviously dump on the price, right? If MicroStrategy Michael Saylor announced tomorrow, like over the next 6 months, we're going to dump Bitcoin every day, the Bitcoin price would crash. Now, I don't know why he would ever do that, because he's holding a lot of Bitcoin, so he would lose a lot of money if he did that. But there's some sorts of attacks there, right? Where the U.S. government seizes El Salvador's Bitcoin and then is like, we're going to dump it or something like that. So there's some nuances there, but overwhelmingly, it doesn't really matter how other people decide to interact with Bitcoin. We can't stop them from interacting with it however they want to, and the network isn't at risk.
I feel like the greatest. I don't know if I would call it a. I mean, I guess it would fall in the negative, but the biggest trade-off with someone owning so much Bitcoin or becoming such a big figurehead in the space as Michael Saylor is, like you said, there's a risk that he sells. There's a risk that he sells out. There's a risk that something happens to him and his company stock tanks and the board decides to sell all his Bitcoin, and you know what I mean, just remove
he gets
it.
Hit by a bus or something.
Yeah.
We're dumping everything.
All of your problems with centralized entities, but that doesn't change. What people need to understand is that doesn't change anything about the Bitcoin network. That will change the price. There will be a change of hands and a reshuffling of Bitcoin. But the US dollar price is not baked into the protocol. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
And I mean, I look, I ultimately my thesis is that the Bitcoin price goes up over time with adoption, or the Bitcoin purchasing power, however you want to frame it. If we're going to talk about not using the US dollar necessarily to measure it, but just the purchasing power of Bitcoin, how much bread you can buy, how much meat you can buy, how large of a house you can buy. I think that goes up over time with adoption because Bitcoin is scarce. So as more people adopt it and own it and accumulate it and use it, the price should go up. So when we're talking about these kind of events where like large holders might end up selling and tanking the price, this is a short term. This would be a short to medium term type of effect. Long term, that wouldn't really change the thesis. If anything, it broadens the base of Bitcoin holders. And ideally, the majority of them that end up scooping that coin up is smaller holders that are holding their keys themselves, that are more distributed, right? We want that like strong base. When you start to talk about like pressuring Bitcoin stakeholders, like you want that strong base of people holding their own keys, using their own node, located around the world, is definitely a benefit, right?
So when we, hear these arguments, I guess against Saylor or Musk or Cash App, whoever's holding the Bitcoin, I think it doesn't fall on the ears of the general public, but there are whales with so much more Bitcoin than all of those entities. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you've been in this game a long time. What do you think about Bitcoin whales? Are they malicious? Are they benevolent? What are the trade-offs there to having such anonymous just monsters of Bitcoin?
I think at the very least, it's really fucking cool that there's just like people that are like some of the wealthiest people in the world and no one has any idea who they are. Like that's never really been possible before. That you could just be like anonymously super wealthy. But I think they're overstated a bit. I think there was a lot of lost coins. I think, we just had like a dormant wallet that was 10 years old. Go active again because you can see on chain activity. So 10 years was 2012. A lot of the coins that haven't moved since before then are probably never going to move. I don't like imagine securing Bitcoin back then was way, way, way more difficult. Like the wallets were really rudimentary. Like imagine sitting on that kind of money and never like upgrading your security setup or anything. Like I find it really hard to believe that there's that many of them, but they do exist. And I think you can't really frame them as bad or good. We don't really know who they are, and they can act however they want to act. But like we said earlier, it doesn't matter that they have a lot of Bitcoin. They don't have more control over the network. And naturally, like as the price increases, what you do see is you see people, finally fold and start either spending their Bitcoin or selling their Bitcoin, and it naturally distributes. And when you start to talk about like this idea of equality or fairness, Bitcoin won't magically solve wealth inequality. But it guarantees a fair monetary system that the rich and the powerful can't co-opt and control for their own benefit. And when you talk about launching a network like this, it's really it's impossible to like if there's this theory that people have, the VCs love this theory, which is like this airdrop to the world. Like every single person gets this many coins, and then that's that. It'll be the fairest launch ever. Everyone gets it. But then you have to say to yourself, how do you actually prove that each person gets their share, whatever that share is? And you start to go down these things like ID checks. The World Coin has like retina scans, DNA, stuff like that, fingerprints, and all of them result in basically a centralized third party has to decide where that goes. And that's a point of corruption. That's a centralization risk, is a point of corruption. That centralized third party will end up controlling the network to some degree. Now with Bitcoin, what did Bitcoin do? Bitcoin has this system of proof of work where you have this verifiable proof of work that was put in. And what that means is, since the beginning of Bitcoin, without a trusted third party, any person who has acquired Bitcoin has done it in exchange for verifiable work. They either mined it themselves and had true cryptographically verifiable work in order to receive Bitcoin, or they bought it from someone who mined it themselves. So they're exchanging their work that was turned into US dollars or euros or whatever for Bitcoin. And as a result, some people ended up accumulating more and some people ended up accumulating less, but no one got given it for free. No one got a free lunch. No one got a free ride. I mean, some of these people, like buying Bitcoin in 2011 at $1 or whatever, and sitting on it to $50,000 and securing it and not losing it, potentially accumulating more, is like not an easy task. This was not, just free money handed out to people like a lot of newcomers like to think.
I did want to stop you there to give people their last chance to get free Bitcoin in 2021. We'll just pop a couple QR codes on screen and let you guys fight over them while we talk. But
it's also not free. You have to fight over them to get them.
Yeah, they're not exactly free. You have to be on your toes, and you have to have the Carrot app. You have to give us an email address. That's the trade-off, and that is a real trade-off. There's like you said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs, and it's interesting. Like, even a fair distribution, like let's say you're just kind of ignorant of any social sort of failures on the part of communists or socialists throughout history. Any sort of fair distribution or even distribution, let's say you could do it without a third party, right? It's only going to stay that way for a moment. In a free and open market, capital has a way of shifting to stronger and stronger hands, and to people who are rewarded with more work of allocating more capital, right? This isn't a bad thing. We don't have to look at, hate the rich and hate the people that are the best at, or under the current environment are the best at allocating capital, right? There's something to be learned from them. And I think the way forward is through ungovernable sort of capital and hard property that can't easily be manipulated. It can't disenfranchise anyone, and everyone has a chance to play the game now. I think that's I think that's the difference that Bitcoin offers versus the dollar, who everyone who holds dollars is being disenfranchised all the time,
except the ultra wealthy, which aren't.
Well, they're being inflated too, right? I mean,
yeah, but they're holding hard assets. So like the way I look at it is the financial system, the traditional financial system, is rigged. It's controlled by a small group of people, industry leaders, really rich people, co-opted government politicians who they pay for. And because it's such a centralized system, they're able to co-opt it for their own gain. With Bitcoin, income inequality will still exist, but at least that the actual money system, the ruler that you're measuring your life's work and your wealth, that can't be gamed, that can't be manipulated, that can't be controlled. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you said.
Yeah. So what else? What have you been working on in the shadows? What's new in Matt Odell's world?
The big thing for me is we've spent the last year getting OpenSats up, which is OpenSats initiative. It is a initiative to fund open source developers and projects. And we got our tax deductible status, 501c3, this week, which we thought was going to take longer. So if you donate in America, at least, you get a tax deduction. And really the goal of this initiative is like, so there's a lot of good organizations. There's HRF that also has open source development funding. They didn't exist when we first started working on it, but they've been doing great work. You have people like Brink, you have Square Crypto, and then you have a lot of individual exchanges and companies that just go out and fund developers themselves. Like BitMEX has been very big on that. OKCoin. We really wanted a organization that was focused on individual supporters. We are going to accept big corporate money as well. If they're going to give us money, we'll take it.
Yeah, of course.
But the idea was kind of like a pleb focused initiative where any pleb can donate Bitcoin, or they can donate through credit card. And I think the credit card, ironically enough, will be a very big thing for plebs, because they'll be able to just set it to, $50 a month, automatically donate to OpenSats. We're going to stack with that $50. So when it comes in, we're just going to instantly convert it into Bitcoin. So you're like giving upward Bitcoin price pressure. We're going to hold Bitcoin, and then we're going to donate the Bitcoin out to open source projects and contributors. And I think we can get to a point where, like, if we get 2,000 Bitcoiners to give $50 a month, then all of a sudden we have $100,000 a month, no strings attached, open source funding, without any kind of corporate sponsors or anything like that. That's like super powerful. So then there's two elements to that. There's a general fund where we have a 9-person board that I helped assemble, of Bitcoiners of all walks of life. And our general fund will be administered by our 9-person board. So we'll decide where that money goes. We're not taking any money out of it. So we're the only organization, I'm pretty sure, in this space that is 100% pass through, which is part of the reason why it's taken us so long to launch, is because we're not making any money off of it. And then the alternative option is we are going to be listing projects like Mempool, Seed Signer, that if you choose to donate to them through us, you get the tax deduction, they get the money, and then it doesn't even go through the general fund. So there's two aspects there.
So can you give me that website real quick? I want to throw it up in the chat for everyone to get a look, to get more information.
I think it's opensats.org. It's either .org or .com.
Yeah, my producer's saying
I think we have both. I'm pretty sure we have both. Yeah.
Okay. Hell yeah. Well,
but the public donation page is not open yet. It should be open in 2 weeks. Hopefully, we'll see.
That's super exciting, man. So how do you come to consensus, or have you determined which developers or projects? I know you've talked about this a little bit recently, but you would, put those funds to?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have, what is live on the website is an application process to get listed on the website as a open source project or contributor that people can actually delegate to, right? Or earmark their donation to if they don't want to contribute to the general fund. So that's an application process. Obviously, after we get off the ground, that's like almost a way of seeding those projects. After we get off the ground, a lot of us are neck deep in the open source ecosystem. If we see something that's not necessarily listed on our website, like we'll reach out to the maintainers, be like, would you like to get listed? Do you want to potentially get donations from OpenSats? The general fund is going to be more of a quarterly thing. Every quarter, the board will get around. We'll basically all make proposals for who we think should get some money. And then we will vote on how that money gets distributed. And that one's a little bit harder for us to have necessarily like a hard rubric for which projects and contributors will get money out of that general fund, because it's a moving, it's a flowing situation. What we don't want is, we don't want HRF to support Seed Signer, and then Brink to support Seed Signer, and then Square Crypto to support Seed Signer, and then us to support Seed Signer, and then there's a bunch of other developers that haven't gotten anything. Right. So like, as HRF's announcing who they're funding, as Square Crypto or Blockstream are announcing who they're funding, it's going to change a little bit. And then on a quarterly basis, we're going to decide where we deploy. And one good thing here is that we have very good working relationships with Gladstein at HRF, the guys at Brink and Square Crypto and stuff. So like, it's not like it's, there's good communication there, so we can be complementary rather than competing. The more the merrier. Like the one thing we don't want is a single organization doing 95% of the open source funding in the space, because then all of a sudden we're back to a central point of failure, which in these kind of situations, you can't avoid a central point of failure. But what you can do is you can mitigate it by having a lot of different organizations all doing similar things.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. It sounds, do you want to talk about the board and how you elected the people you did and who you guys are bringing?
So like there was no election. It was literally just, you want to join us on this cause. First of all, to start off, with Dennis Reinman, I did a website called BitcoinDevlist.com last year. And BitcoinDevlist.com literally just listed a bunch of Bitcoin developers and open source contributors. And then you could donate to them directly with Bitcoin. And what was the advantage of that? We didn't have to set up an organization. We didn't have to take custody of the coins in between or anything. And you can just use the power of Bitcoin, right? Just send money around the world and no one can stop you. Well, what happened? What happened was most people wanted to donate, but they were too intimidated by actually picking which developer they wanted to fund and sending them Bitcoin directly. So then the idea for OpenSats was born, but I was trying to avoid it because honestly, I hate paperwork. So if I could have BitcoinDevlist.com was my ideal situation, because I didn't have to deal with legal paperwork, didn't have to deal with accounting, didn't have to deal with tax deductible status. You can just send Bitcoin to them directly. That still exists. That's still an option. If you want to just not trust a third party like OpenSats, you can just donate directly to them over there. The board we have a little bit of everything. We have Ben Price, who is former, he was the one who came to me. We're basically the co-founders. He came to me with the idea. He was partially inspired by Bitcoin Devlist. He was former Visa Crypto. Now he's running the Bitcoin Company, a new startup in the space. We got Dredd on board, who is a Jamaican Bitcoiner that is really focused on the developing world. We have Janine Ronem on board, who is very privacy focused Bitcoiner, where no one knows where she lives, which is awesome. She makes me feel like a complete LARP in comparison. We have Elaine Wu, who's an absolute legend, and has been operating in the space for a very long time. We have Nifty Nay, Lisa Negut, who works for Blockstream on Sea Lightning. We have James O'Byrne, who's a Bitcoin Core contributor. There's 9 of us. We have Catan from Australia. I don't know how many I just listed, but you can see the whole list of people at opensats.org. But it's we took great lengths to try and make a board of ride or die Bitcoins. We have Udi, so you have the shitcoiner perspective.
Oh no.
we tried to make the board be as varied as possible, but filled with ride or die Bitcoiners. And I'm very proud of getting them all on board. I think it's a really great team, and I look forward to working with them.
Yo, my fellow Bitcoin lovers, have I got something specifically curated for you. The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium markets intelligence newsletter. This isn't some pay group selling buy and sell signals. No, this is a premium Bitcoin analysis led by Dylan LeClaire and his team of analysts. They break down in an easily digestible way what is happening on chain, in the derivatives markets, and in the greater macro backdrop context for Bitcoin. This newsletter turns volatility into a joke. So hit up members.bitcoinmagazine.com and use promo code podcast for 30% off the deep dive. That's members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code podcast for 30% off. Divorce your paid group and learn why Bitcoin is the ultimate asset by Dylan and his team. My fellow plebs, the Bitcoin conference is back. Bitcoin 2022, April 6th through the 9th, is the ultimate pilgrimage for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin Conference is the biggest event in all of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. We're leveling up and making this bigger and better than ever. I'm talking straight to the moon with the 4-day long festival in the heart of Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center. This has something for everyone. Whether you're a high-powered Bitcoin entrepreneur, a core developer, or a Bitcoin newbie, Bitcoin 2022 is the ultimate place for you to be with your people and celebrate and learn about the Bitcoin culture. So make sure to go to b.tc/conference to lock in your official tickets and use promo code Satoshi for 10% off. You want more off? Pay in Bitcoin and you'll receive $100 off general admission and $1,000 off whale pass. Those are stackable. So go to b.tc/conference and attend the best conference in Bitcoin history.
That's awesome. Let's should we talk about Udi a little bit? Udi's a pretty fun guy to follow on Twitter, man. Interesting guy.
I don't know. Like me and Udi, like we have a good relationship. I just feel like he lost the plot a little bit. But he's a smart guy. In the beginning, I think he knew exactly what he was doing and he was making some good points. There is like a little bit too much tribal groupthink in Bitcoin. One of the coolest things about Bitcoin to me is I feel like Bitcoiners are the best Bitcoin critics that were very adversarial minded. Mm-hmm. And I think partially it's because of Twitter, the way the incentives of Twitter work. It's just very easy to get engagement if you just go the tribal group thing kind of way. Mm-hmm. You know, like a perfect example is like recently, like when I've been more critical of El Salvador and stuff, like, you know, people like coming out like, stop fighting Bitcoin. It's like, I'm the most bullish fucking person ever. I'm just trying to have like an adversarial conversation about what this situation is unfolding over there and to have an open mind, you know, like, but God forbid you say like, oh, you know,
yeah,
oh, Lightning doesn't have perfect privacy or something like that. And like people just fucking come at you.
Oh man. I said that in a Clubhouse room once and people were down my throat so fast about that. And I'm like, well, it's not as secure as Bitcoin. It's just not. It's objectively not. I don't know what to tell you. There's a difference between the final settlement.
So like Udi had some good points and objectives early on in his little I kind of view what he does as it's like almost like Colbert, you know, it's like he's playing a character. It's not really Udi.
It's like a satire.
But he's just taking it too far. Like there's just a lot of I think there's a lot of straw man arguments now. I just feel like there's a lot of overgeneralization, like, oh, this idiot Bitcoiner that most of us think are idiots, like is being an idiot. This is why all Bitcoiners are idiots or whatever. And then it's just like, it's completely unproductive.
Yeah, it's not productive.
But maybe Twitter isn't real. Like it's also, a lot of this comes down to like Twitter being a horrible medium. Like I guarantee you, like 99% of Bitcoiners who disagree with his tactics on Twitter and get triggered by his tweets and stuff, if you actually had like a beer with him in person, like you would agree with the majority of things he says and you would enjoy that beer.
Yeah, he seems like an enjoyable guy, and I think I agree with him on a couple of points. Probably the biggest one being mostly that these other cryptos, I mean, this is what I get from his kind of charade at large. It's like these other cryptos have very little influence, no influence on Bitcoin whatsoever. So it's like, right. Why do we bash on them? Yeah. You know, I'm not going to hold the other like cryptocurrencies outside of Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the strongest asset. Why would I trade my, you know, strong asset for anything weaker or that is subject to governance? But I'm not going to shit on somebody's right to develop their own cryptocurrency and project. You know, I think it's very important that they have a right to create an NFTs, even though I think they're useless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a Bitcoin Zen. And I think every Bitcoiner should try and find that. I would say though, just to reiterate almost what we were talking about earlier, right, is that the problem I have is with promoters and them not disclosing trade-offs. It is that's how it all that's how a lot of uh this anger was often in the beginning directed to promoters. Like when uh like in 2016 or whatever, most Bitcoiners were attacking Vitalik, other lead developers and promoters of Ethereum. They weren't attacking individuals that were basically getting suckered into those schemes, right? But now it's more like it's just open hunting season. It's like you see like some like new coiner come into the space and they make a completely uninformed tweet about something because they've been misled themselves, and then that person is just fucking like completely and utterly destroyed with like personal attacks and stuff, and like that's
Yeah.
not really productive, and they're not
No.
our enemy. But like if it's someone like a Vinny Lingham, or like even Eric Voorhees a lot of times, or like a Chris Dixon, when you have like these promoters that have massively large accounts,
Yeah.
they have, you know, massive financial incentive to basically unload these tokens onto retail, and they're not
Yeah.
disclosing trade-offs, then I think it is absolutely important that people make that obvious, make that clear, shed some light on that, and try and provide education to retail that's getting suckered in. But it's a fine line, and it should be done with a level of grace and respect, you know, where we're better than just sinking down to like personal attacks. And it's kind of just, and once again, I think this is a lot, it has to do with the internet and has to do with Twitter. It just comes down to like the lowest common denominator all the time, right? Like you just do all caps, fuck you. And like, you're just going to get a better thing than some like reasoned 3-tweet thread about why they're wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, I wonder, are some of these people truly, you know, bad actors or misleading people in your opinion? Or I always like to say there's a path to redemption for everyone. I mean, what do you think of someone like a Vitalik or a Brian Armstrong, who have, you know, these huge populations of people at their fingertips, and who are leading them to have their property lost basically, and to disenfranchise them? I mean, do you think they're acting in good faith, or do you think they're ignorant of what they're doing, or how do you perceive it?
No, I mean, I don't think they're acting in good faith. Look, I mean, I think to a degree, people should have some kind of path to redemption. I think the first step to that is actually attempting to take the path of redemption, not us just giving them a, you know, a free pass ahead of time. Like I shouldn't have to speculate on what Brian Armstrong has to do to get redemption. Like he should start trying to.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Some of these guys, like the Vitaliks, like the Brian Armstrongs, like the Chris Dixon, like they've just done it over and over again. They intentionally conflate arguments. They intentionally act in bad faith all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what, it was like Joe Lubin and Vitalik were like on stage, and they were like, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago, they were like, yeah, ETH 1.0 was always an experimental chain that was not supposed to last forever. Like that's why ETH 2 is existing. This was always our plan. Like there's no personal responsibility there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Brian Armstrong decided to sell surveillance tools to the U.S. government, so that they can spy on everything, he didn't say, you know, they put a gun to our head and we had no choice, right? Instead, he said, we needed to get an ROI on our investment, and I'm for, you know, decentralized finance and freedom or whatever. And he just like talked out his ass, and he just straight up lied through his teeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first step to talking about any kind of path redemption to these large promoters is they have to actually take some personal responsibility, and actions speak louder than words. But words as well would be nice, and they're not even giving us words. And like another perfect example here is like, so Doge pumped this year, massive Doge pump. And Coinbase has like 1 million tokens for sale, but they don't have Doge for sale. And why don't they have Doge for sale? Is because the only tokens that Coinbase lists, they list them as quick as possible, is who their wealthy VC investor buddies all have huge pre-mine bags of. So even though Doge is like the king of the shit coins, Coinbase was late to list it. Robinhood had it before they did. It took them months to get it listed because their priority has always been dumping on retail. And if you look through that list, there's just garbage after garbage, but no Doge. And like that's, to me, that's a perfect example.
Because there was no insider VC. I mean, on that front, Elon's right. Doge is a lot better than some of these highly controlled cryptos. It's
a complete joke of a project, and the code base is horrible, and the tooling around it is really bad. But yeah, there's no insider pre-mine or ICO or anything.
Yeah. So in my mind, there isn't something that could come along. There's nothing that can be bootstrapped into existence on this planet that will surpass Bitcoin that we know of. I'm not kind of agnostic to that possibility. I think something that would meet that and surpass the definitions of Bitcoin would only be Bitcoin itself. And I always wonder what people think in terms of the future. Are you know? So
that's another thing with the shitcoiners, right? Is like when shitcoins are pumping, they'll all come out and be like, flipping's happening. And then like when the bear cycle happens and their tokens start cratering against Bitcoin, as is tradition, they're all like, why can't we kumbaya? Like we're all in this together, And it's like, once again, bad faith. Like what the fuck is going on here? So in terms of flipping or Bitcoin getting replaced, I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe there was I never really thought it was a possibility, but maybe there was a bigger possibility. I think as time goes on, it becomes less and less of a possibility just because Bitcoin has this first move advantage that's growing, especially when like 90% of the so-called crypto space is like focused on trying to replace proof of work. And proof of work is this beautiful distributed proof of work with the difficulty adjustment is this beautiful mechanism. And Bitcoin continues to be focused on it and focused on ASIC efficiency and more ASIC manufacturers and more miners around the world. And as we get that lead, that lead is actual physical hardware, right? That is physical hardware around the world. It's really hard for anyone to ever really catch up to that. Especially when maybe if you want to call it Ethereum number 2, like they've just been destroying their R&D and their whole mining sector. Like no one wants to spend millions of dollars investing in ETH security if it's going to switch to proof of stake and they're going to get bricked out. So as time goes on, it's becoming more and more obvious to me that the Bitcoin chain, the Bitcoin the network is the one that's going to be, the global money of the world. Now, the question is the future, Bcash, SegWit2x drama that happened. A lot of people took away from that it means like we'll never have a contentious hard fork. We'll never have, and this is a controversial opinion. People don't necessarily like this opinion of me. I've gotten potentially, people have tried to cancel me over this opinion. My Bitcoin Zen comes from the fact that, so a lot of people took Bcash and SegWit2x to mean that we'll never have a hard fork. That Bitcoin is truly impossible to really change at a fundamental level. That change gives it its security and its robustness because you can't add vulnerabilities to it going forward. I actually think that my Bitcoin certainty and conviction on Bitcoin grew as a result of that hard fork happening and a couple subsequent shitty hard forks that happened, like Bitcoin Diamond and stuff, because Bitcoin, the ledger that sits today, every day we have, the ledger grows, this blockchain grows in Bitcoin. And to me, that is the global the global database of wealth. That's the global ledger of wealth. It shows the true value that everyone has in the world, based on a fair distribution and subsequent, fair maintenance of this project. And as a result, that ledger itself has value. Who owns what when they own it? Now, I think in like a worst case scenario, like one of these like Bitcoin doomsday scenarios or something, where let's just say theoretically, like someone comes out with a technology that is just a million times better than Bitcoin, right? I think rather than a new chain being created with that new technology, anyone, anywhere, as I said earlier, can fork Bitcoin. So if you just took whatever the current Bitcoin balances are at that given time, and you just put it on a new technology, that would be the winning chain. And as a result, that means that if you own Bitcoin, you are guaranteed a place in whoever the winner is, a non-diluted place in whatever the winner is. Now, 99% of the time, that'll probably just be the Bitcoin chain. But in this black swan type of situation where there's massive new technology is discovered, then maybe we migrate to the new technology, but all our balances stay the same. And with the Bcash fork, what happened was we all got Bcash. If you had one Bitcoin, you kept your one Bitcoin and you got one Bcash. If you just went to sleep and didn't participate in any of that drama, your Bcash would have went to zero, but you still would have had your one Bitcoin. You had nothing to lose. If Bcash succeeded, then you would have your one Bcash and your one Bitcoin would have went to zero, but you would have lost nothing, right? So that is, to me, is my true Zen, is that the ledger, my place in the ledger is secured. And if there's some massive technological breakthrough, that technological breakthrough coupled with the ledger of the value of the world, the Bitcoin ledger, will guarantee my spot in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Backwards compatible, no forced upgrades. It's
but
really
in that
a beautiful
situation,
thing.
it wouldn't be backwards compatible. So that's why it's a little bit
After
you
we
see what I'm
fork,
saying?
right? Yeah.
Like if there's like we can't even fathom what that is. I'm just saying, like in 30 years or something, if there was like some kind of massive technological breakthrough, it would be a hard fork. Like you would have to upgrade to access those coins.
So let's say we need to upgrade.
It.
Let's say we need to upgrade past SHA-256. We need a stronger form of encryption. Someone has,
it's a hashing algorithm, not encryption, but yeah.
Sorry, a stronger hashing algorithm. What happens then?
That would be the messiest.
Mm-hmm.
If we keep SHA-256 as our hashing algorithm for mining, then no matter what, we have this amazing, this amazing network of hardware around the world, mining and securing our network, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if we had a switch, we'd be very vulnerable during that switching process. That's not a very clean situation. Now, these one-way hash functions, it doesn't look like there's a conceivable break there. The real concern, there's no quantum computer risk on that. The real concern would be having malicious miners that controlled SHA-256, which is the concern we had with Bitmain back in 2017, where they had like indirect control of 60% of the hash rate. If they wanted to start attacking the network, we would have been forced to change our hashing algorithm, our mining algorithm, right? Now, they didn't do that. Since then, mining has distributed. There's still kind of a risk if like we have too much hash in America, or like America and the Western countries, and government seize it and start trying to attack the network, or the classic FUD piece that is kind of broken down now this year, that like, oh, China's got 60% of the hash. In those situations, we basically have a weapon of mass destruction. And that is, we're going to switch the mining algorithm and we're going to start from fresh. And if you're the person or entity that controls the 60%, we're going to make your hardware completely obsolete and brick it, right? Like it's worthless. It's just a brick that's just sitting there that can't do anything, because all this hardware can do is just hash 256. So it's hash shot 256. So it's like literally a purpose-built computer. If we change the mining algorithm, those computers are worthless. So it's like a game theoretical, like Mexican standoff. Like if you want to attack the network, we're going to blow the whole thing up. But it's always been theoretical. Like it'd be super risky at the time of blow up, because what mining algorithm do we move to, and does a malicious actor control that one? And Bitcoin had the benefit of, when it first started, that it kind of was incubated in like no attention. There was like 100 geeks that were paying attention to it. If we were trying to do it now, when it's worth, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars, like there's so much value at risk. Like people are going to be attacking us left and right. So that's like the real black swan. And how does that really getting solved? That's getting solved by more mining manufacturers, more foundries, more miners spreading out around the world in different jurisdictions. That's what we want. So it's not concentrated anywhere. Short of anything on the mining side, all the other stuff we can continue using SHA-256, whatever we move to. We'd have two competing SHA-256 chains. And that's what happened with Bcash, right? And then miners, because Bcash was a SHA-256 chain as well. They didn't switch their mining algorithm, but miners will choose whichever one is more profitable and which one's more valuable to them. And the other one will trend to zero long-term. And that's what we saw happen to Bcash and Bitcoin. And I think that's what we'd see happen in the future. But in the future, it could, in my mind, it could be the new technology one is the one that wins. But as a Bitcoin holder, you're good. You still have the same amount of Bitcoin. You don't have to gamble and pick which one is going to be the winner. You can just sit there.
Awesome. I mean, it's a good deal. I mean, that's like you said, it helps you find your Bitcoin Zen, to know that if you've at least done security and taken security as far as you're comfortable taking it for the time being, as we know, because that can be endlessly done up and always improved, then you can rest pretty easy at night as a Bitcoiner.
100%. I like my American citizenship. So I never actually tried to execute on this, but I always thought it would be an interesting study of that thesis. If you basically created like a hedge fund to do this, but so like a malicious entity that went around and like took Ethereum, kept all the code the same as Ethereum, but then just changed all the balances to Bitcoin holders' balances. And then you like take Dogecoin, you just switch all of them to Bitcoin holders' balances. So you take the snapshot of the Bitcoin chain, and then you plant it on all the shit coins, and then you have them compete against each other. So it'd be like Ethereum versus Ethereum Bitcoin, and Litecoin versus Litecoin Bitcoin or whatever, and just make that just like pure chaos. And then the reason I say it'd be like a hedge fund is because you trade the chaos, like right before you announce it, like you go short on Ethereum, and then you could do all these like crazy shit. But I'd rather not go to jail. So
yeah, I love it. It reminds me of true Bitcoin miners who have the spare hashing power to mess with and destroy the chains of low rent cryptos.
Right, exactly. I like adversarial attackers.
Yes. Well, Matt, what are you excited about, I guess, in the new year, or what are your kind of closing remarks here as we wind down 2020-21?
I don't know. I'm excited about a bunch of different projects I'm working on. I mean, I just keep moving forward. I'm excited, to be working with you at Bitcoin Magazine and helping this conference be a massive fucking event. I think people don't realize how big the conference is going to be and like what we have planned there. I am personally excited because I'm no longer a nomad. So like I'm actually settling into my own house. So that'll be good.
Beautiful. Nice.
We're launching BitcoinTV.com is blowing up right now. We have over 70 content creators. That's fucking awesome. The 2 podcasts are going well. Probably going to launch a new podcast. I don't know. I'm excited about a lot of things. Better privacy UX on Bitcoin would be great. It seems like we're getting a lot of momentum on that front. HRF and Strike just teamed up with us at OpenSats to have 3 bounties in that regard, all Lightning focused, which is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for what we don't know is coming. I think it's easy to get caught up in the rat race and be like, nothing really changes that fast in this space. But then you look back a year and it's just been absolutely insane. If we were talking this time last year, we would not know that El Salvador was going to be adopting legal tender. We wouldn't know that Tesla was going to buy Bitcoin. We wouldn't know that a futures ETF would be approved. We didn't know that Taproot was going to get activated. We didn't know Lightning was going to grow as much as it grew. I didn't think podcasting 2.0 would work.
Didn't know we were going to 45K now. We've dipped a little lower.
Yeah, I mean, we were sitting on like 28K this time last year. Didn't think we were going to necessarily hit 65K, right? Like the amount of things that caught me off guard this past year is immense. And didn't think we were going to have an Indy 500 Bitcoin car, like even the little things,
Yeah.
So I think I'm really excited for the things that we're not even excited for. They're just going to catch us off guard. It's going to be fucking beautiful.
Awesome, man. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to to carrying out this new year and working with you in the future. And we got to have you on some more Bitcoin Magazine live episodes. We got to get these up on Bitcoin TV also.
Yeah, 100%. Would be my pleasure. Whenever you want me, just let me know.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on, Matt. It was great talking to you today.
Cheers.
Happy New Year, brother. Yep.